So we're going to start shading our hat with burnt umber using a 3/4 inch flat, walking it out nice and far. Now I've reduced this to video it, so of course I'm going to be using smaller brushes. Walk it out, lean to the water side of the brush when you're doing that. And then take your mop and soften. I'll go all the way around. I'll turn my piece. And I come back. Nice and soft, walking it out. We'll shade the entire hat. Everything else gets so much shading that it's not a big deal if I get a little on something. Come back in here. And I'm going to dry it, and then we're going to dry brush. So I'm switching down in size with my brush because I don't want to come and cover up or choke out all of my burnt umber. I guess that would have helped to have that in the camera. And I'm going to shade in behind the eyes. And then we're going to come in here under the hat. Big key is don't press hard. When you think of it, you're doing a side load float. So think float, like a feather. And all we're wanting to do is strengthen this up, make this a little bit darker. Once your frog's done, you might think, oh, I might like to darken that a bit more. You'll know. Okay, I'm going to dry that. We're going to go on. Okay, so we're going to shade our bow. Now we've base coated the inside of our bow with Midnight and Tropical Blue Mix. So you may find that I'm just going to come in from this side, float it in. I did that side, and then I'll just, when that dries, I'll come back in and do there. So you may find that you don't see it too much, but you will see it more as it dries. So I'm going to shade along the edge. I'm going to float a shadow along the outer side of my bow, and using the chisel of the brush, I'll just pull out a few there. I'm going to do the same thing on both sides, but I'm just showing as I do. We have to allow things to dry. So I'm going to do it in the steps. Nice and dark, walk it out. This bow just, I love these colors together. They're beautiful. And I'll just come in with a crease, turn my brush, same thing here, float in. Now I'm doing that other part to the bow, opposite of where I've already done. Come in here. You see how I'm taking care of them little overshading bits that I had. I'm going to come down this side. So this ends up with back-to-back floats. I'm going to strengthen up those little creases I had there. Shade the outer side. We do all this cute work on this part of this bow over here, and then we end up coming in and covering it with flowers. Pardon me. And float here. Same thing on this side, chisel in the little marks. And we're going to, this is going to take care of this little boo-boo I have here too. There. So now I'm going to dry it, and we're going to highlight. Now I'm going to dry brush with my dome stippler. Scuff it off on my towel here. This is, I'm going to be using Calypso Blue. So I always start where it's going to be the brightest, in case I haven't taken enough moisture out of my brush. And I'll come into the middle sections. With what's left, I'm going to come up here in the inside of the back of the bow, in the loop. So that's, see how that gives us dimension in there? You still see your shading, but it gives you the look that, I'm going to put a wee bit more in my center, a little brighter. All right. And then I'm going to, I like to give it a quick hit with the blow dryer or the heat gun, just to set that dry brushing. If you don't set your dry brushing and then you go back over top afterwards and you float a highlight, what ends up happening is that you will see track marks in your side load. It'll kind of make marks through your dry brushing. So if we set that, that helps. So I'm going to float a little soft float along the edge of the bowl, just to strengthen my highlight there, right at that tip of the bowl. And this is with my Calypso as well. Then I'm going to take my liner, and I'm going to nice and thin with Calypso. We're going to, whoops, outline the rim of the bow. I like to stop just a little bit shy of coming into the edge, so that it fades in there. See where I started so close here? So what I do there is I would take, because you see that it pops out too much. So now what I do, if I've done that, is I just come in there. See how I can just float a little bit? This side it's not there, so it doesn't matter. And I can just, with that nice and thin, I want to maybe add a few highlight creases. Just pull a few of those in there. And I'm going to take camel. Now this in your notes is back when we floated the highlight of camel on our hat rim. But then once we do all the shading with the blue, you kind of end up choking it out. So this way I'm going to take, I've got a drop of water in there rather than thinning it. It's floating on the edge of my brush there. So I'm going to come through and add a nice highlight trim along the outside edge of my hat, just to strengthen up. And again, I'm going to fade it off as I end, like I did with the, you don't want to come right into that dark area. Get right over that blue. and just end there. So that's my highlight on the edge of her hat. So now we're going to go to see now once I've highlighted that, to me, I can see there. Sorry about that. Shaky there. I can see that it wouldn't hurt to have a little bit, so I'm just picking up a little camel, a little cocoa even, on the brush with the camel. And I'm going to dry brush. This is my another dome stippler. This project, we use a lot of these, but just a nice little bit there, there, just to soften that out. And you can see where my blue is coming through here on my hat brim, so I'll just come back in that area. There. Now, this surface that I've done this one on, I'm going to probably do a soft raw umber float behind it afterwards, just to lift it off of the board. So now it's time to shade our frog. I'm going to start like I did with the bow and kind of break it up in the places for you. So I'm going to shade, we're using lush green, and I will shade coming down to separate her legs and really walk it out. So showing you there, now I'm going to come in and float behind her thigh. Now all of these areas have to be done when it's dry on that side. Like where I floated on that side, I have to wait to do this on the other side. I'll come back and on this leg here, I'm going to come in. So she's really getting what I call a lot of cross shading. You're going to be going back and forth, but you have to wait until areas, of course, are dry. So I'm going to pop up here now while we're waiting for an area to dry. I'm going to start like I do with my brush on the chisel. Go to the flat. Come down and end to give her that bit above her cheek. And this is where, if you happen to get any of that burnt umber on here, the Lush will pretty much clean up that edge around that edge of the cheek. So I'd repeat on the other side of the face. Load your brush. I'm going to come in from this side again. Nice and soft. Walk it in as far as you can, but we are going to be doing a great bit of dry brushing on this to kind of do our little, what we called our cheater, walking it in. Anytime you feel you didn't walk your shadows in far enough, dry it and do a little dry brush in the same color. I'm going to strengthen this up. Work on hiding that transfer line. If you really like to have those lines, I have them there right now so that you can follow along and see where I'm going, but normally I don't bother with them. I just wing it a bit. But if you feel you need to have them, once you paint over them, you can't erase them. So if you really feel you need to have them there, you can put a coat of your base coat over top of them, and that will subdue them. I'm going to come from around here. Dry that. And then I'm going to strengthen up any of those areas that aren't good to strengthen up with the dry brushing. It's close to the edges. Anywhere that I've missed, like right here. Clean that up. Strengthen that one. Hope you're not getting dizzy. Now, I do want to have a float. You'll see in your pattern there's a line. I kind of should have put I should have put a break in the line there, because it really confused a lot of people when they were base coating. So I'm coming here and I'm leaving a little gap above there, but I'm not wanting it to be huge and dark. So that's why I'm switching to a little smaller brush while I do this. And I'm going to shade the tops of our little eyelids. Again, that's an area where I've got burnt umber kind of taking over. I like to do a float and then flip my brush over, and then I'm using the paint from the other side of my brush. It kind of helps out a lot. And then again, I will switch to an even smaller brush to do the ends of the toes. It'd be for you it'd be about a 10 on the original size, 3/8 or a 10. I'm using a 1/4 or an 8, We're, again, not a place to panic about. We're going to be putting a lot of flowers, grass, shading and dry brushing underneath their little toes. So, and I can clean up any edges on my toes from mist base coating. Not that that would ever happen. But I come back in there and I float over those little areas and fix them. And they're little little frog feet. So they don't have to be anything spectacular. There. So now I'm going to dry it, and we're going to strengthen everything up with our dry brushing. Catching in some areas there. Okay, now we're going to dry brush this little froggy. So I've got another one of my oval dry brushes or stencil brushes, and I'm going to come in, and I think with my doing this I might be shaking the camera on you. I apologize. Scuff that out. Any of these areas that you want it darker, that's the areas you would start in. Nice and soft. So this appears that I've really been super successful at walking my shadow out. We call this our cheating walking it out. It works nicely. It strengthens up your shading, and it also helps to anywhere, like right here, my shading's a little strong. So if I come in here with my dry brush, and I have reduced this guy so much to do the video that I'm getting it all over the place. But I will touch up my green after, my bleach sand, pardon me, afterwards. So I'm just gonna continue dry brushing along the areas that need to look like, see how here it's gonna look like I really walked that shadow out nicely. And remember what I said, we have to heat set this before we might come in here and do any dry brushing or any reshading or anything on here, which I am going to reshade. We're going to strengthen up all of our shading. There, that looks pretty good. Do you see how that really works well to make it look like it has really walked out that shadow? So now we're going to dry it and we're going to reshade. We're going to mix raw umber and lush green 1-to-1, and we're going to strengthen our shading. All right, we're going to take our raw umber and lush green mix and strengthen our shading. Now this is one of those colors, again, that you're not going to really notice as much until it dries, but it does make a difference. Raw umber is a wonderful color to add to anything to shade and strengthen with. It really is a beautiful toning color. Raw umber and neutral gray works so nice together as well. Not for this, of course, but so I'm just coming in here, a few of these places, strengthening up my shading. I'm not looking to have it overpowering. Whoops, hang on. I've gone ahead and shaded and dry brushed the belly in the lichen, pardon me, in the driftwood as said in the videos, and dry brush the little dots on as well. Save some time as your in your instructions. So I'm going to start dry brushing our little frog using a dome stippler. Of course, remember this one is reduced. And I'm just going to start with matcha green. And I'm going to dry brush. And I always start in the place that's going to be the brightest area in case you have too much on your brush. Then I'm going to move on to other areas that have a fair bit. And I'll do up in her cheeks. Her cheeks we like a nice bright amount as well. And when you're you've got an area like we have coming up her toes and her eyelids, I happen to have a very tiny piece because I did reduce this. So what I'm going to do with that is I'm just going to take one of my lunar blenders. That's not in the best condition, or a wrecked filbert or anything like that. And I'll use that to come up and dry brush in these tinier areas. So that works really well on the toes as well. And then I'm going to just pick up a little bit. I will heat it first with my heat gun. And I'm going to pick up on the dirty brush some of the celery shoot. And then I'll come back in here and brighten up those areas. The celery shoot has more of a, I'm going to call it a limey green. So it really pops up and brightens the matcha. And of course, you're not putting anywhere near as much as you did with the matcha. Again, I'm going to do the same thing with my lunar blender that I want to be able to come in here and just kind of brighten up those highlights. We don't start with that brighter one. We have to work our way to it. So that's why we start with the matcha. And then I will heat set this. And I'm going to add the dots in the green. So I'm using that bubbled stencil, well cleaned, not. And you don't want, mine again is quite small, so I don't want them to be too big. I'm going to take some of the lush green and raw umber mix that we had for shading on the frog, and if you don't have any left, you can go ahead and just mix up a little bit. And that's, we're going to come in, you see how we dry brush in those dots up on her forehead. Give her little, as we call her, freckles. Try not to put them too uniform. And we are going to add some, go with another tiny one. I'm And I am going to add some with the matcha. So she'll have some nice little highlighted ones. And again, it's not too many. Some of those didn't show up for me. A little too faint on the brush. Okay, and I can put a couple up on her eyelids as well. Just on the top part there. So she's got her freckles everywhere up there, and then I will continue down here. Now I've taped off. It's really taken a washing because we've done quite a few of these now. But I taped off with some Scotch tape there on my stencil so that I could lay it in place here. And then when I stencil, it's giving me a half a circle or a half a dot on her leg so that I'm not getting it complete. Dot. And then I'll just come in and I'll add some more here and there. I want a couple of big ones. Let's see how that looks, and maybe I'll throw in another. And the odd little tiny one. And then again, it's now back to matcha. And we'll just get a couple of those in. And that's not looking too bad. She's got to have a few on her arms. While I'm in the bright, I'll just go ahead with them. This little one, she has tiny arms, so. And I'll get the dark again. And then that should be good. So after that, we're going to go ahead, touch up any areas that need to be, and we will see you next week.